Hey, Fedheads. Welcome back to another episode of Sharing Our Pairings, the show where we smoke cigars and find out how it pairs with various beverages and sometimes food, depending on how we feel. I'm your host, Tripp. We're live on Facebook, broadcast around the world in the Armed Forces Radio Network, and available, of course, as a podcast and on the YouTubes. And before I talk about this guy over here, my co-host, I do want to do a little bit of housekeeping. Uh, I've been really bad about getting the videos and the YouTube videos and the podcasts edited and uploaded. I'm gonna commit that we're gonna be uploading now on Mondays and Tuesdays, so that way I have the weekend to get everything edited and ready to go, and I can schedule it to launch on Monday and Tuesday. So that way we'll have a more normal release schedule. But anyway, I just wanted to mention that for everybody, especially so that I have said it on record and I can't not do that now. So, as I said, I'm here with my co-host, Dennis. Dennis is having some weird camera issues, but that's all right. We can still see him mostly. He's just a little blurrier than usual.
It brings out the best of my features, I think.
Yeah, exactly. It's like wiping Vaseline over the lens. Show. Got to make sure my cigar doesn't go out. Number one priority. So we're here today. We're smoking the La Gloria Cubana. The new, let me see if I can get a nice beauty shot of that. Come on. There we go. The La Gloria Cubana Colección Reserva, sorry. So this is an interesting cigar because it is the first cigar that E.P. Carrillo has blended for La Gloria Cubana since he left the brand about 8 years ago. So to go over the history a little bit, so the non-Cuban version of La Gloria Cubana was started in 1972. Originally, they were made at the El Credito factory in Miami, which is a pretty famous factory in Miami for cigars made there. And in 1980, E.P. Carrillo took over the company, and he was kind of, he was heading up the company. He was doing the blending. Eventually, he moved production from Miami to the Dominican Republic as, they gained some steam and some followers. And then in 1999. La Gloria Cubana was actually acquired by General Cigars, which is kind of how we know of Gloria Cubana in the modern age, is as a General Cigars brand. And he was still working on La Gloria Cubana up until 2009 when he left and started E.P. Carrillo Cigars. And reportedly, what he says, I mean, you can never tell if this is like a story that they tell or if it's real. But what he says is that he actually created this blend in the 80s and kind of shelved it. And when General asked him to come back and make a cigar for La Gloria Cubana, he decided that this was the right blend. So the blend is a Ecuadorian Sumatra over Nicaraguan binder and all Nicaraguan fillers. And it's, rather than being made at the General factory like all of the other La Gloria Cubanas in the Dominican Republic, it's actually made at E.P. Carrillo's La Alianza factory. And we're smoking the Robusto here, which is a 5.5 by 50. And it's the wrapper on this thing is not the prettiest of Sumatras, don't you think, Des?
It's a little, it's got some character to it, to say the least.
Yeah. It's kind of splotchy. Like, I don't know how well it shows up on the camera, but it's not evenly colored at all. Like, there's dark spots and light spots, which isn't necessarily a bad thing at all. It just, for those upper tier cigars, typically people want to filter out anything that's not matching the rest of the cigar. They want even coloring. But I should have checked the price of this cigar. Do you know the rough price of these?
MSRP $8.95, seven and change to $8.95.
That sounds about right to me. Let me do a little bit of quick research.
It comes in 3 vitolas. They got a Torpedo, they got a Robusto, and they have a Presidente size. And I believe all those are 54 ring gauge.
And you're right. So I guess this is actually a 5.5 by 54. It really does not seem like a 54.
No, definitely. It's not as imposing.
Yeah, I'm wondering if this was like these are pre-releases, so maybe they changed the size after the release, or maybe this was a pre-release exclusive size. But this seems like a 50 to me. But you know, my eyes can't always be trusted for that sort of thing. And my voice may sound a little weird. I'm on the back end of a cold. And as Dennis and I were talking about before the show, I'm getting some interesting tasting notes tonight because of that. So we'll see how that goes because my palate seems a little bit jacked up. Or at least it feels a little jacked up. And let me see, our Facebook widget doesn't seem to be working. Let me see if I can restart that and get it running. So yeah, what do you think of the cigar so far, Dennis?
So I lit it a little bit late, so I'm kind of catching up to you now. Mm-hmm. But now that initially, the first couple of draws, they were pretty heavy and dry. And not in a bad way, but like we talked about earlier, just sort of that really intense earthy essence.
Yeah, I describe it as like a dusty earth kind of smell.
Yeah.
Like it reminds me of like that if you're somewhere, I don't know, an abandoned building is what comes to mind for me, weirdly. But like there's dirt that's completely dried out and it's very dusty. And when you step in it, it kind of comes up into the air and you smell that like old, not musty, but just like really dusty kind of earth. And that's what it starts off as for me. I know that's kind of specific, but
I think that's a perfect way to put it. That's exactly what I'm getting out of it.
Sometimes I start talking about flavor notes like that, and like I get halfway through, and I'm like, "God damn, I'm a crazy person. I'm just making things up, aren't I?" But no, that's the kind of thought that it evokes from me.
It's dry like the bottom of a cowboy's boot.
Mm-hmm.
It's around there.
And then it very quickly picks up some spice on the retrohale. And I'm getting like again, I'm coming off the back end of a cold, so my tasting notes may be way off here. I get like a graham cracker sweetness and just a hint of like what I always describe as like a meaty sweetness. And I just got some other flavor that I guess it's a little bit more graham cracker. Like the finish, now that I've blown the smoke out and I'm just tasting it on my palate, it's all graham cracker. It's like a spicy graham cracker with a little bit
spicy,
of black pepper.
Yeah, definitely black pepper in this thing, and I feel like there's some strength to it too.
Yeah. Trying to get our Facebook widget here working, but it is not having it. Oh, I'll forget about that for now. I'll try to fix it during the break. Sorry. Again, I'm coming off sickness. I got a haze in my brain here. All right, so why don't we get right into the pairings? So my first pairing is as per usual, a local beer. This one comes to me from Block 15 Brewing. So on their cans, they've got very simple marketing. On their bottles, they have like these epic pictures that look like they should be on like a 80s rock album. So this one, you can't really see it in the picture. It is a person holding what looks like it looks kind of like a hourglass there, if you can see it. But it's actually a cold brew coffee drip machine, like the Japanese style, where you put the coffee in the top and then it has a little valve and it just drips one drop out at a time. So this is from Block 15. They're based in Corvallis, Oregon. They were founded in 2008, and only in the last 2 years or so have they really picked up around the Portland area, which Corvallis is about 2 hours south of us. So they were very localized before. Now all of their distribution is self-distribution. I've talked about that before. They deliver their beer fresh every 2 weeks. every store that carries them gets a delivery every 2 weeks. And some of their best sellers are their Sticky Hands IPA, which is, I mean, if you're buying it and it was brewed more than 2 weeks ago, you should shop at a different store. Because as I've said before, I've been able to get a 4-pack of cans that was packaged on Monday and delivered to my local store Tuesday morning. So
That's insane.
It's the freshest IPA you can buy at a grocery store. But this is not their IPA. This is their Cosmic Cold Brew, but this is the maple cream variant. So this is their Nebula Stout, which is their kind of base stout. And then they add 24-hour cold brew from Bespoken Coffee Roasters, which is down the street from them. And then they add maple sugar and lactose. So I'm expecting it to have like a lot of that stout quality and a little bit of sweetness from the maple and kind of that creamy flavor from the lactose. But as I was sneaking a few sips, I'm getting some weird tastes off this. So I'm going to take a few more sips and try to figure out what's going on with this while Dennis talks about his first pairing.
My first pairing is just fantastic. I'm so excited about it. I'm just really pumped as I've been sipping on it, last 10 minutes or so. And my first pairing comes from Grimm, and kind of nice bottle, good size, nice bottle, Psychokinesis. It's a sour ale, and it's got this really weird funk to it in a really awesome way. And it's 5% alcohol. And this particular bottle was brewed back in January, so it's only a couple of weeks old, which is awesome. It's really fresh. You can taste it. And these guys are interesting. They were founded in 2013, and their thing is they actually do basically exclusively limited releases. That's it. Maybe the beer comes back, maybe the beer doesn't come back, but when they make a release, you don't know what's going to happen. And people go nuts locally. People go nuts for their stuff. And, in the early days, like many other breweries, especially now, you see a lot of breweries starting off as gypsy, meaning they go to another brewery to get their beers produced. They just work on the recipes themselves. For the first 5 years, Grimm was actually doing that. And they were going to whoever, would be willing to produce their beers for them until eventually they got popular enough to get their own facility. And this thing is really weird. Let me read you the kind of the description that they have on their site for it. So it's dry hopped. It's a hazy golden wild farmhouse ale. It's dry hopped with Mosaic, Eldorado, and a hop that I've never heard of. It's called Jarillo. So maybe
how is that spelled?
It's a Jarrylo.
Huh.
It's kind of funky. I've never heard of it before.
He mentioned that in the green room, but he didn't say how it was spelled. And my thought was that it's some weird, hybrid of Amarillo. But with that spelling, that wouldn't make sense.
I don't know. These days there's so many hop strains out there. I wouldn't be surprised if it had some Amarillo in there.
Yeah, and it's. I would guess that that's a hybrid of something, because typically when you find a hop that you haven't heard of, it's either in kind of a rare case, it's from somewhere weird. Like a lot of hops these days are coming from New Zealand.
Oh yeah, tons.
But most of those are more conventional names than Jarillo.
Yeah, it's a kind of.
I think it must
name.
be some guy's hybrid that he's growing. That's
and the guy's name is
proprietary.
Jarillo. Yeah, Jarillo Johnson or something like that. So
exactly.
Their notes on this really interesting. They say guava, watermelon candy, which is kind of cool, pineapple, and ripe mango. And I should have also mentioned that this is actually conditioned on oak for a little bit of on light oak for a little bit of flavor, not too long. And sipping on this thing, man, watermelon candy, absolutely. Think about what was that candy back in the day? Warheads.
Oh, I was gonna say Jolly Rancher.
So it's not as sweet as a Jolly Rancher. It has a nice twang to it, like a Warhead, kind of sour, and the nose is all pineapple. It's really cool. It looks nice, and it just tastes. It's really light at 5%. This is easily you can kick back a bottle or 2 bottles of this without really worrying too much.
Yeah,
it's funky. It's cutting the spice of the cigar nicely too. It's giving the cigar a little bit more balance.
Cool. And before I talk about my pairing and answer a couple of audience questions, we're going to take a quick break. I'm going to see if I can fix this Facebook widget, see if we can get that working. We'll be right back.
Brought to you by Gurkha Cigars. Gurkha Cigars, makers of the world's finest cigars. Try the 93 rated Heritage featuring a Rosado Ecuador Habano wrapper, Nicaraguan binder, and Dominican, Pennsylvanian, and Nicaraguan fillers. Blended by Gurkha's blending team at American Caribbean Cigars, it is hand-rolled Nicaraguan, available in 35-count boxes. Talk to your local B&M about the Heritage today, or talk to them about other fine Gurkha cigars. Whatever your taste preferences, Gurkha has a cigar that's right for you.
I'm trying to see if we're back. Yes, I think we're back.
All right.
Sorry about that, guys. That's never happened before. Our broadcast software actually crashed for the first time ever, which is kind of surprising. So I'm going to talk about my Block 15 Cosmic Cold Brew Maple Cream here. So on the nose, it smells like cold brew coffee with a little bit of maple. But when I taste it, I'm trying to figure out. I'm going to have to go back to it because I feel like it has to be my cold, or this bottle somehow got funky. Because it's got a little twang of sour in there, and not like sour milk or anything like that. It tastes like a sour beer, like that lactobacillus kind of bite. The citrusy bite is there. Which really messes with the flavors of coffee and maple, and there's definitely a little bit of that like cream in there. But I'm gonna have to come back to this one because it's just messing with my head here. And speaking of sours, Anthony Rasicki wants to know. He loves sours, but he wants to know if we've found that they are difficult to pair with cigars. I think they're very difficult to pair with cigars. To me, it's kind of like it works kind of the same way as IPAs. There are certain ones that pair really well, but if you get too far into that sour territory, it's just taking over your palate and you're not tasting any of the cigar anymore. So I think like a lot of gozes I think go really well with a cigar because they work kind of the same way that like a club soda would or something like that, where it's more cleansing your palate than it is complementing the cigar. And in that way, I think that some sours compare really well. But there are some that are just so sour that they like pucker your palate up, and then you can't taste the cigar as much. What do you think, Dennis?
Yeah, I think that generally sours, especially the funkier the sour, from my experience, it tends to linger on the palate a lot longer. Yeah. So when you talk about drinking an IPA, you get that hop resin in your mouth, and that kind of lingers on the palate. With sours, it does the same thing, and in a lot of cases, it can do that even longer and take away from pretty much any cigar, even the strongest, most flavorful, oily cigar you can get.
Yeah.
It's tough. It's definitely a tough pairing.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, there's just not... Sorry, I'm trying to see if I can get this Facebook thing working, but it may just be broken right now. But either way, yeah, I think it's kind of like those... I'm trying to think of a specific IPA off the top of my head, but I can't think of one. But like an IPA that's super hoppy, super bitter, super resinous, that doesn't have that like sweet backbone that pairs well with a cigar, where it's just kind of assaulting your palate with sweetness. You get the same thing with sourness. So, I mean, I say I hesitate to pair any sour that I've never had before with a cigar. If you've had it before, you kind of know what level of sourness there is, and if there's some sweetness, some maltiness to kind of compete with that and balance it out, I think it can be a very good pairing. But by and large, sours are just not made for pairing with cigars or really anything, in my opinion.
Yeah, it can be tough. Even, cigars, food, it's not easy.
Mm-hmm. And I'm going to move on to my next pairing, which is Old Weller. This is Old Weller Antique. This is the old bottle. They changed the bottle, I don't know, about 6 months ago or so, maybe a year ago. So I've just had this bottle around for a little while, and as you can tell, it's on its last legs. I need to go buy some more. So Old Weller Antique is made by Buffalo Trace. It's part of their weeded selection, which includes Old Weller, kind of all of the Old Weller brands, Old Weller Antique, Old Weller 12, Weller 12, Weller Special Reserve, William LaRue Weller, and then the very famous Pappy Van Winkle. So, according to the legend, this is basically the same spirit that goes into Pappy Van Winkle. It's the bottles that aren't good enough for Pappy Van Winkle. They don't release any numbers on specifically how many make this cut and how many don't. But it seems like it's a fairly small percentage that makes the cut for Pappy Van Winkle. Then the stuff that's a little better, gets a little more age, turns into William LaRue Weller. And then the stuff that just doesn't quite make the cut, isn't aging the way they want it to or something like that, ends up going into the other Weller brands. So this particular one is bottled at 107 proof, which is what gives it. That's why it's called Old Weller Antique 107, which is the same proof that pretty much all the Pappies are bottled at, which is why that's kind of the closest link, I think, to Pappy in terms of flavor. I haven't had Pappy, but from what I've heard, this isn't identical or anything. It certainly tastes different. So I'm going to take a couple sips, see how it pairs with this Gloria Cubana, and let you talk about your next pairing.
I'm trying to figure out this funky taste that I'm getting, funky in a good way. I'm getting some fig notes from the cigar, and I'm trying to figure out if it's my second pairing or if it's the cigar itself. Are you getting any fig, that kind of like dried fruit fig thing going on?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
I'm definitely getting a little bit
spice,
of that sweetness like that.
It's definitely getting sweet, and I think the spice has dropped off significantly, like noticeably dropped off for me.
On the palate it's still spicy on the retrohale for me.
Yes, definitely. So let me talk about my second pairing. It comes from Kelso, which is in Brooklyn, or Brooklyn-based, I should say. And this is their, it's too close. This is their edible IPA, so it's a New England-style IPA. Mm-hmm. Comes in at 7%, so it's pretty strong. 50 IBU. And these guys, what they did with this, they actually loaded up with tons of Mosaic, Simcoe, Eldorado, and Equinox. And the Equinox part is kind of cool. So for those of you that are hop fiends like I am, Equinox is really, it's an interesting strain of hop because it has anywhere from 2.5 to 4 milliliters of oil per 100 grams of hop, which is significant. If you think about, Citra hops, for example, it's about twice as much as Citra has. And that oil really comes out. And that mostly contributes to the nose, but it also contributes a lot to the not the bitterness, but the mouthfeel. So the amount of time that it stays on your palate. And I was wondering if that was kind of messing with the cigar and giving it that figginess.
No, now that you mention it, I definitely get some like dark stewed kind of, it actually reminds me a little bit of like a Fig Newton because it's got that graham crackery flavor and that like that sweet but not super sweet, like dark kind of stewed fruit kind of flaver.
Dude, I think you hit it on the head. That's definitely a Fig Newton. Absolutely.
And Anthony Rosicki says Green Flash palate wrecker wipes his palate out. He guessed it did its job. That's the kind of IPA that I'm talking about. Like palate wrecker's got a lot of sweetness, but it completely assaults your palate with hops. And when you're just drinking the beer by itself, it's a great experience. But if you're trying to pair it with a cigar, it demolishes.
It's so hard. Maybe even impossible.
That being said, I have paired that particular beer with a cigar before. It just doesn't work that well. Interestingly, Green Flash no longer distributes in Oregon.
Oh,
And I've
wow.
heard a lot of speculation that it's because, I mean, and they're just down in California. I've heard a lot of speculation that the reason is that because their beers are so expensive, they don't sell as well as they do in other states because we're so used to high quality beer that's really cheap. A lot of people have been complaining about the Modern Times Brewery opened last weekend in downtown Portland. And a lot of people have been complaining, which, I mean, Dennis, you will laugh at this. People are complaining
no.
because it's $7.50 for a pint of beer. For some of the beers. For the more expensive ones, it's $7.50 for a pint. And people are freaking out because it's so expensive.
Yeah, but what's the cheapest beer though? If $7.50 is the more expensive.
I think $5.50, $6.50.
All right. You know what? Happy hour in New York, if you go to a beer bar, if you're lucky, like the bar that I go to at least, $5 is the happy hour beer, which generally is still good stuff. You're not getting garbage, but
yeah.
Standard beer, when I go out, it's $8, $9 for not even a pint. You're getting 12 ounces.
Yeah.
Maybe. 8 to 12
ounces.
Typical
here for a draft is like $4 to $6. Which is, I think it's kind of a steal. Like anywhere you go that you're getting $4 for a pint of
That's
IPA
awesome.
is pretty good.
Of a good beer, absolutely.
That's less than a canned beer in some places.
Man, you can get a Budweiser for $4.50 at a bar.
Exactly.
Or a Bud Light here. It sucks.
Man, so Old Weller Antique, man. Jose says 107 is titties, which it totally is. I mean, the sad thing about it is that a couple years ago, people started saying that it's basically as good as Pappy. And then all of the people like me who have never had Pappy before went out and started buying it. And I've literally seen people selling a bottle of this for $150 on Facebook or, on Craigslist. I'm not really on Craigslist here, but I've seen them online for about $150 at the top end. And I can find it pretty much any day of the week for like $26. And that's like the regular price for it. The problem is that they don't make enough of it. And the demand has gone way up in a short period of time. So now in many states you can't even get your hands on it. On the first party market, like you can't buy it from a retailer. The only place
New York is insane for that.
Yeah,
I think retail in New York is like 48.
Yeah, and I've seen bars charging as much as $50 for a glass of this.
Jesus,
which is, I mean, that's bonkers crazy.
That's absurd. That is absolutely absurd.
And while I can't get the 12 at all here, the 107 is fairly easy to come by. I might have to drive half an hour to get it. But it's always in stock somewhere. And man, I think for $26, even if you're paying $50 for this, I don't know if you're going to beat this whiskey for $50. Like this bourbon outclasses every other bourbon in its price range and the next couple levels above that. It's like on the nose, there's like that sweetness and the kind of, I don't know, trying to figure out how to describe it, the velvetiness of the wheat with a little bit of like spikiness from the rye that like is a little bit spicy, a little bit of like cinnamon.
That's an important distinction too. The velvetiness of it speaks to the quality, because a lot of times for 20 something bucks you go out and get a whiskey, you're not getting velvet, you're getting some fire starter,
especially at 53.5% alcohol.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, that's 13.5% more than pretty much everything else in the price category, which is crazy. And then on the palate, you've got like it's I would say if you don't like sweet whiskey, you would hate this. Because it's definitely got a lot of sweetness, but part of that comes from that it's almost cask strength. And there's a lot of vanilla. There's not too much char. There's a little bit of that, that oaky char kind of flavor, but not very much. It kind of sticks to your palate a little bit. And then there's a little bit of that, like, I don't know how much rye there is in here. All I know is about that it's like 13% wheated. I don't remember the rest of the mash bill. But I would guess there's some rye in here. It's got like that cinnamon, like baking spice, licorice kind of flavor. It's fantastic, and it goes pretty well with the cigar. I haven't taken a draw in a while because I've been talking too much.
I'm really liking the way the cigar is developing. That biscuit's really coming out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of it's still got graham cracker, but it's really getting that like biscuity. I hate to use the word yeasty, but that like
it is. You're right. It is
sourdough
absolutely.
yeast kind of flavor is in there for sure. And I'm finding the spice is starting to come back a little bit of red pepper spice.
Mm. It's definitely nuanced.
Yeah, it's got a lot of nuance, but at the same time, it's just a solid cigar, which is I think that's a treacherous crossroads, where some cigars are so elegant and refined, and they make the flavors kind of hard to pick out, where you have to be paying attention to enjoy it. If you're not paying attention, you can't enjoy the cigar. I'm trying to think of one that comes to mind. Herrera Esteli is one that I think is like that, where it's got so much complexity that you have to be paying attention or you're just going to get sweet spice, and that's it. With this, there's enough like high-end complexity that you're just kind of tasting it without even thinking about it. And then there's enough underlying complexity that if you are thinking about it, you get even more complexity, which is, I think, the sign of a very good cigar. Something that you can smoke while you're, I don't know. I always use mowing the lawn, even though I don't think I've ever successfully smoked a cigar while mowing the lawn. It always goes out. Or
it's hard to do. It's very hard to do.
But if you've got your mind on something else, this is a cigar that I think would do well. Or if you're just sitting down, relaxing by the fire, smoking your last cigar, contemplating the day kind of thing, that it would work.
It's a very easy cigar to pick up and just smoke and not really even have to think about. And it stands out on its own. In a really, not to say that it's not complex, because it is, but it's very, very simple in that way. It's easy to approach.
I would describe it as it's got simple flavors that are really good and complex flavors that are really good. And if you're not paying attention, you're only going to pick up those simple flavors, maybe a little bit of the nuance. But then if you're focusing your brain power on it and really thinking about what you're tasting, you're going to get some more of that complexity. You're going to kind of taste the layers that you didn't notice before. We'll be right back. We're going to take another quick break and hopefully get this Facebook thing working, but I think it's dead for the day. We'll be right back.
This show is sponsored by Cigar Oasis. Don't spend all your time worrying about your cigar wrappers cracking, splitting, or falling apart from humidity fluctuation issues. Set it and forget it by choosing Cigar Oasis, a professional solution which provides equal distribution of humidity with precise electronic controls. Monitor your cigars through the internet using the Smart Humidor Wi-Fi attachment. Why don't you spend all your time enjoying your cigars and relaxing, and let Cigar Oasis protect your cigars? Cigar Oasis has solutions for any humidor. Make sure you set it and forget it today.
All right, and we're back. We got some audience comments. Anthony Rasicki wants more General collaborations. I think General has been doing really good with their collaborations. I mean, they've kind of always collaborated with AJ, but usually they're collaborating with AJ for like CI brand stuff, like Diesel and stuff like that. Like they own all those brands, but they market them as CI brands, not as General brands. And recently they started doing that with CI or with Diesel, with the oh man, what was that blue label? The new one, the Diesel Grind.
Yeah,
which I thought was really good, and then which was kind of a higher end version of the Diesel, which I thought was a good choice. I really liked the La Amistad Silver, and the gold was very good too. I thought the silver was better. Um, and then obviously they're collaborating with EP Carrillo for this one. Um, I think they're doing. I think it's a smart thing for them to do those collaborations because it allows them to branch out a little bit and kind of capture a little bit more markets of people that they're not necessarily targeting normally. Because people have obviously different palates. Some people like everything that EP Carrillo's ever made, and some people like everything AJ's ever made. It's just how people's palates work. But Jose says he wasn't a fan of the AJ collabs, but you know they're not for everybody. And oh, Anthony Rosico wants to point out the Cohiba Blue and Macanudo Inspirado too. Yeah, those were both really good. Well,
yeah.
I didn't like the Macanudo Inspirado white as much as the black, but the black was very good. And Chico Ray says, "What's going on, fellas? What's up, Chico?
Hey,
good to see you,
what's up, Chico?
11 days and counting until Pro Cigar. I'm excited. We're gonna be there. It's actually 11 days and counting until it starts. But it's kind of weird. It's actually kind of like Puro Sabor. There's two parts of it. And with Puro Sabor, you kind of get both parts included. With Pro Cigar, the two parts are kind of separate. There's a part in Santiago and a part in
Yeah.
what's the other city?
I forget.
I don't know. The city that's further south that I'm blanking on the name of right now. But so the first 2 days are in southern DR, and then the following 3 days are in the northern part of DR. So we're going to the part in the northern part of the Dominican Republic. But either way, I'm so excited. I cannot wait to kind of see the DR. I've been to Nicaragua a couple times, and I love Nicaragua. I'm excited to see if I like DR as much.
It's going to be really fun. I'm excited for it.
Chico, thank you. Casa de Campo. That's where the first part is.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so we're going to the second leg of Pro Cigar, which is in Santiago. So I'm excited to see some factories, check out some farms, stuff like that, and meet new people, because that's what makes traveling for cigars fun.
That's what it's all about.
And I'm dumping some water out because I've got ice here for my final pairing, which is melted. So I'm actually just going to dump the ice and forget about it. While I pour my last pairing here, which was supposed to be cold, but it'll be moderately cold. And this one, I have a bottle, but this is a reused bottle. This is obviously not Portland potato
vodka.
Red.
Red potatoes. Come on.
But if you look in there, you can kind of see what's
cool
about this. You see that char in there?
Oh, yeah.
That's a little bit of charred oak. So this is a Negroni that I made. So for those who are unfamiliar, a Negroni is 1 part gin, 1 part red vermouth, and 1 part Campari. Campari is everybody ever has seen it. But most people haven't really tasted it and don't really know what it tastes like. It's this bright red liqueur. You'll see it a lot in, like, I'm trying to remember where I've seen it. Like, it's a hipster poster. Like, they'll have these old Campari ads from the 60s. Or even before. I've even seen them from, like, the 30s. And they'll have these old Campari ads as posters. And you'll see them in the background of movies and stuff like that. I've noticed a lot of them over the years, but that's because I really like Campari. So Campari is this liqueur from Italy, and it's got a bunch of herbs in it that they don't disclose. It's herbs and fruits. The main flavor that's easy to discern is grapefruit peel. So it's kind of sweet, but it's really bitter. And I really like it. I'm a big fan of like bitter cocktails and stuff like that. So this hits the spot for me. So you can see there, it's kind of reddish, and it comes out a little more brown on camera, but it's really kind of a almost bright red. It's a little darker than they usually are. And that is because I made a Negroni, and I'm going to show off my oak bottle
Ooh,
from
very nice.
Campione. So this was sent to me by Camacho as part of the launch for the Nicaraguan barrel aged last year.
It's a great cigar.
Yeah, it's a really good cigar. So as part of the media kit that they sent one of these. Um, and so it's a solid oak bottle, and they char the inside. I believe they said that this one is a level 2 char, and they do sell one that's a level 4 char, which I'm kind of interested in. Because level 4 char is like they call it alligator skin. There's only a couple bourbons that I know of that are aged in barrels that are level 4 char. The only one I can think of off the top of my head is Wild Turkey. That's why Wild Turkey has like that intense taste that can really stand up to like that 101 proof
Yeah.
in Wild Turkey 101 is because it's aged in these ultra heavily charred barrels that impart way more flavor. But I believe this is a level 2. So I made this Negroni, um, 1 part gin, 1 part red vermouth, part Campari. If you're curious, the gin was just Tanqueray, which is kind of my standard gin. Um, and then I aged it in this thing for about a week. And they say you only need, depending on what the liqueur is, or the liquor is, between 1 and 10 days. So I let it sit, I think about 6 days, and ended up with this nice oaky, like, oh man, there's so much oak on the nose. And then of course I bottled it so that it wouldn't just age forever. Because with something like this, I wanted it to be a little more delicate than I wanted it to be a little more delicate than like a dark whiskey. Um, but I have considered putting something in there and just leaving it for like 6 months, see how it turns out. But I don't know. So what's your last pairing, Dennis? While I take a couple
Interesting.
sips of my
I'm so
Negroni.
jealous. That sounds amazing. My last pairing comes from Hawaii. And it is from Maui Brewing Company. It's the coconut porter from those guys. It's really, I guess it's one of their more popular beers, or one that most people have seen in stores. A lot of people have seen it. And these guys, I didn't know this until just recently. I found out earlier today. They're the largest craft brewery in Hawaii. And their distribution network is massive. They're in 23 states and 10 countries.
Wow.
So they're all over the place. And they're still, even though they're the largest craft brewery in Hawaii, technically speaking, they're still pretty small. So it's a very small operation. Not many employees. They're not really producing a ton of beer. And this beer comes in at 6%. It's 30 IBU. And it's got some cool hand-toasted coconut and these like really funky hints of mocha. It's I wouldn't say it's overwhelming, but it's definitely there if you look for it. And it's pretty groovy. As far as my pairing with the cigar, I've been trying to figure it out. I don't know where I sit with it yet. It's I'm kind of half and half on it. It looks great. It smells great. It tastes really good. I'm just not sure about the pairing.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes pairings take a little while to get around to.
They do. And
so
this is actually a little bit too cold, so I'm letting it warm up a little.
Okay. Yeah, I get that with stouts sometimes. Jose wanted to know if you have to filter your spirit when you take it out of here. Not really. I mean, this is the only thing I've really aged in there. I put water in a couple times just to keep it sanitary. But I mean, that's all of the sediment that came out of it. I didn't filter it at all. So you don't really have to filter it. I'm sure you could, and you would get a slightly cleaner result. But I didn't, and I haven't had a problem with it. I might when I get to the bottom of the bottle. We'll see if when I start getting chunks in my Negroni, if I decide to go the filter route at that point.
I actually purchased a mini barrel once, and I filled it with wild turkey, and I threw ghost peppers in there for about 6 months, like whole fresh ghost peppers, and I let it hang out, and it produced this really funky sludge that I had to filter out. But it was pretty good. So it's it's up to you. If you want to eat the sludge, it's cool. But if not, you can always filter it. Nothing wrong with that.
If you want to eat the sludge.
Yep.
Man, this is a good cigar. Buenas noches, Jerry Stash. Thanks for watching this evening. If you're just tuning in, we're smoking the Gloria Cubana Colección Reserva.
Nice
blended.
classy label too.
Yeah, it's like a slightly more classic version of the regular La Gloria Cubana. Like it makes me think of what La Gloria Cubana labels probably looked like in the 70s.
Yeah, it's pretty.
And then of course you've got the EP Carrillo secondary band around there, just to let you know what you're smoking. And these were on a lot of top 25 lists this year, which I could see. It didn't make the cut for us simply because we hadn't smoked them yet. I've talked about it a couple times, but it's hard to smoke everything you get at the IPCPR because I can't smoke new cigars back to back all day. Like my palate gets burned out after 2, and then I'm smoking for the experience of smoking rather than for the flavor, and then I have a hard time judging a cigar. So I try to give everything kind of a fair shake. And if I feel like I smoked it on a dirty palate, I try to smoke it on a fresh palate later. But this was just one of those ones we didn't get around to yet, which makes me kind of sad because it's pretty damn good.
Yeah, this is my first one. I've never had these before, and I really like it.
Yeah, I really like this cigar.
That biscuit is really developing too. It's becoming a lot rounder and a much fuller flavor. Mm-hmm. And not full flavor in the traditional cigar sense, but full flavor. If you think about dough rising, it's kind of like that.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah, I feel like that stewed fruit note, the fig kind of note from before, is starting to fade. And I'm really just getting a lot of that biscuit and a lot of that dusty earth. Both a little sweetness in the background that I think is actually coming from my Negroni. Yeah, I think unfortunately the Negroni is just a little too cloyingly sweet for this cigar. I think it would go better with a darker, sweeter cigar because if you've never had a Negroni, they're very sweet. They're bitter and floral from the gin and the Campari, but then from the sweet vermouth, they've got a lot of sweetness going on. How's your last pairing doing, Dennis?
I just switched from my last pairing to my second pairing, and I've been kind of going back and forth a little bit. I'm not really getting the coconut anymore, unfortunately. I think the cigar's kind of taken over a lot of those coconut and mocha notes, which are really subtle to begin with. As a porter, I think it's fantastic. It's a really great beer. But I think the cigar kind of needs something more.
Yeah.
Something a little bit with more body to help round it out. And I feel like this porter's not really doing it.
Yeah. And I'm going back through my pairings. I think I got a funky bottle of this stout, man. Like it's not as sour as it was before, but there's definitely some sourness there that I was expecting once I had some whiskey and some Negroni, that if that sour was in my head, it would be gone. But it's still got like that funky bite on tail end.
Sometimes you're down with the sickness and sometimes you're not. It's okay.
Exactly.
Speaking of sickness, my first beer is still kicking strong. I just refilled. I had a giant bottle. I just refilled, and the sour, as it's warming up, all those pineapple, all those guava flavors are coming out, but it still has that funky, like, watermelon candy, as they put it, this watermelon candy sourness, which to me is basically a warhead. Mm-hmm. And it sounds kind of disgusting, I guess, but in a really nice way.
I mean, that's how sour beers go. Sour beers are hard to describe because you talk about things like sour candies and stuff like that. or lemons, or limes, anything that's got like that puckery sourness. And when you're describing it as part of a beer, it's hard to understand unless you've had it before, because it can just sound like, why would I want something that tastes like a warhead was melted in my beer?
I think it's really very well balanced. It's a sourness more akin to a Goza than a traditional farmhouse sour.
Yeah. Farmhouse sours tend to be have kind of a sweeter backbone, but then also be way more sour. And Gozas tend to have a little less body, but also be less sour.
Yeah.
Just for people who are uninitiated in the realm of sours. And we've got to take our last break here. This segment is brought to you by our friends over at Drew Estate. Smoke some Drew Estate cigars. They're good. They let me think of what they've been talking about recently. Man, I'm trying to remember. I think they teased something new recently, but I don't remember what it was. Yeah, that's all right.
Those tins were pretty funky. I just saw some tins in the shop the other day.
Oh, dude, if you're sleeping on those,
so
you
cool.
got a problem. You got to smoke those, man. They're so good. They're good, and they're cheap, and they're perfect for like cold weather.
Yes, definitely.
I love those tins. I haven't seen the Herrera Esteli or Norteño tins anywhere. I'm looking forward to getting my hands on some of those.
They're selling. They must be selling out quick. I've been looking. I couldn't see them.
Oh,
I
sure
couldn't find them
are.
anywhere.
All right. So, what are your thoughts on this La Gloria Cubana Colección Reserva?
I'm really digging it. For the first time smoking this cigar, absolutely digging it. That initial spice that hit me really hard in the first third faded out to this really nice biscuit flavor, and it's rounded itself out really well. And this is a cigar that I don't even have to think twice about. I can pick up, smoke it, and move on with my day and just enjoy the experience of smoking. A lot of times cigars get a little bit too intense, right? The complexity takes over, and you have to sit there and baby it and really think about it. And this one lends itself really well to just relaxing, which is important. We all smoke cigars, and it's nice to be able to take some time out and just not really have to do anything or think about anything.
Yeah,
I think that does that for me.
Yeah, one thing I have to say about this cigar is, for me personally, if I start talking too much, my cigar goes out every time. I don't feel like that's a problem with this cigar. This cigar is like, it's kind of got a rugged burn there. It's not razor sharp. But no matter how long I've put it down for, I haven't had a problem picking it back up and smoking it without having to relight, which is huge for me because, normally I have to relight 2 or 3 times an episode.
It's funny. For me, it's the opposite. I have to try to keep myself from smoking through it too fast.
That's because I do all the talking. Wait. I think I didn't get any sourness off that one.
Oh?
I mean, it's still there a little bit. And I'm having a hard time getting past it because it tastes like somebody put a shot of sour beer in my stout,
man,
which is very strange tasting. But I'm picking up more like the maple and the cream.
Interesting. Okay.
I think I might have to get another bottle of this to make sure that I didn't get like
double check. Yeah.
Bottle.
And it's okay. It happens.
Yeah, it happens, and it doesn't necessarily make it bad beer. It just makes it taste different. Like that's if I was drinking this without a cigar, I think it would be really good. And if I wasn't expecting a sweet cream maple coffee, I think it would also be very good. It's kind of like a sour stout, which I kind of dig. But then again, I really like sour beers. And Jose says when he tried to get into sour beers, but they give him heartburn. I can actually see that.
I get that a lot.
They've got a lot of acid. That's how you achieve that sourness.
Yep.
Is through acid. And I mean, it just kind of, have some milk afterwards. I don't know. I don't have any advice for you, unfortunately, Jose.
I don't know. Milk might make him pretty sick.
Yeah, maybe. For me, like, there's no way that I could get hammered on sour beers. I'm I like to drink sour beers in moderation. Like, usually if I go to a tap house and they have a couple sours, I'll have a sour and then I'll have like a stout or an IPA or something that's a little heavier, that's gonna settle that down in my stomach a little bit.
And I guess it's good to note that, guys, if you buy beer in the store, you take it home and it tastes kind of funky and you think maybe you got infected, don't freak out. You can still drink it. It's safe to drink. I think still to this day, there's no known pathogen that can survive in beer. So if it's beer, you're good to go. It might taste a little weird, but you can still drink it. It's totally safe.
Yeah, that is a good point. If you get a beer that's too old, it's got like, no matter how gross it looks when you pour it into the glass, it's still drinkable. And it's just whether you like the taste or not. Like, I've had beers like this where it's like, wow, that has gone off, but it tastes delicious. Actually, a good example for that is Ninkasi Slayer. I got some for Thanksgiving last year, and around Thanksgiving this year, I noticed that I still had the case in my garage. Cracked a couple of those open. They were a little hazier than they were before, but they still tasted amazing. Don't be afraid of old beer.
Unless it's Corona or Budweiser.
But that being said, it's not going to taste like it's supposed to. So I know that, I'm sure it's happened to you. It's happened to me a bunch of times. You go in, you see some beer that you've wanted to try. You buy it. You get home, you crack it open, and it looks funky. Like, it's cloudy, or it's got that kind of, when the head gets like spots in it.
Oh yeah.
From like the oil separating and stuff, so it's not building up a head evenly. And you're like, something's not right about that, and you check and it expired 6 months ago. That's not how that beer is supposed to taste at all. So if you don't like it, don't say I don't like that beer.
Yeah, definitely give it another shot. If you feel like something's off with it, and that's the same thing with cigars. If you smoke a cigar, you don't like it, maybe it's an off day, maybe your palate's a little wrecked. Give it a second shot, see how you feel about it on a fresh palate on a different day.
For me with cigars, I have kind of a 3-strike theory, like, where if I don't like it the first time, I'll give it a pass. Maybe I just had a bad palate day. Maybe it was a bad cigar, because it's as we've said a million times, it's a handmade product. People are making these with their hands. If you've ever made something with your hands, you know that once in a while you make a mistake. And you may have gotten the last cigar that was rolled on that guy's Friday night, and he was ready to go have a beer. So I always try to give it at least 3 tries, and if I still don't like it, that's when I know it's bad. That's one of the things that I have a hard time with reviewing cigars. It's like, if I smoke one and it's like, wow, that was terrible, I don't want to be like, this is a terrible cigar because the one I had was terrible. If it was amazing, I might review it right off the bat. But if it's terrible, I'm going to give it at least another try or two to gain back, what I may have missed.
I'm somewhere in the 2.5 strike range. So if by the second time I'm not sure that I definitely don't like it, I'll give it a third try. But if I'm leaning more toward me not liking it, then that's kind of, after the second one for me, that's it.
I think that's fair. I mean, 2 is the minimum that you should smoke before you decide you don't like something. I would say ideally, it's like in the range of like 5 or 6. Like 5 or 6 is where you really like a cigar, or you really don't. Man, I love this bourbon so much. I could smell it for weeks. I'm trying to figure out how to describe the smell. It's like, it's lightly smoked butter and vanilla.
That sounds pretty good.
Like, it's got a really buttery nose to me. Man. I gotta get another bottle of this. When I started running low, I stashed it in the back of my liquor cabinet, and then just recently found it again. I think probably because at that point I was like, I don't want to be out of this, so I'll just hide it back here from myself. And it worked for a while, but now that I know it's there, I'm going to drink the rest of it within the next couple days, I'm sure. All right, any closing comments about your pairings or the cigar, Dennis?
Yeah, man. You know, my this sour pairing really, really works. Sounds crazy. Sours are super hard to pair. It works so well. It's insane. It's not too sour. It's got a nice body to it, and it complements the biscuit flavors and especially the intensity of the cigar in the last third. Mm-hmm. It complements the cigar really well from the beginning to the very end. And almost like a palate cleanser, but still does contribute to the flavor of the cigar. So as a pairing, I think it's phenomenal. If you have a chance, go out and get it. It's called Grim Psychokinesis. It's fantastic beer, and even if you don't smoke a cigar with it, I think you'll really like it.
Awesome. And for me, the pairing of the night is obviously, as I was just talking about, Old Weller Antique. If it is still available where you are, go buy a bottle. If it's not, I'm sorry. Buy it if you can. If you can find it at retail price, buy it. If you can't, again, I hate paying over retail for anything. But if I had to pay $50 a bottle for this, I probably would. Like if I was in an area where where it wasn't readily available for $26. It's
like New York.
Simply, like New York. It's simply a fantastic bourbon that is in my liquor cabinet at all times, which is saying a lot. I don't have a huge liquor cabinet, but I keep it fairly well stocked, and this is one of maybe 3 out of 15 bottles that is always, always, always there. So if you can find it, go buy some. I hate to hype it up more because it's already hyped up enough, but that's the truth. And I want you guys to, I'm not going to say it yet because it's our catchphrase, but I want you guys to drink good stuff. So thank you everybody for watching. Really appreciate all of our live viewers. Again, as I mentioned before, look for new episodes on Facebook or on YouTube and the podcast on Mondays and Tuesdays. That's when I'm going to be posting them from now on a regular basis as soon as I get caught up. So thank you again for watching. Thank you again for listening. We appreciate you guys out there. We especially appreciate everybody listening on the Armed Forces Radio Network. You guys are out there doing things we're not built to do, protecting those freedoms, allowing us to sit in our garages and smoke cigars rather than fighting the bad guys ourselves. We really appreciate that.
Absolutely.
And it's hard to say it every week because it always makes me feel a little emotional because it really means a lot to me. So thank you guys. We really appreciate it. Stay safe. Have a great weekend. And at Sharing Our Pairings, we want you to drink better, but we want you to drink less.